open. No, yeah. So the YouTube window only shows a quarter of the screen on mine, but I'm hoping that's not the case. It's good? Awesome. Okay, good morning. Yep, that's fine. Glad you could join me today. Oh. Okay. So, let's study the Bible here. We've got Ezekiel chapter 47, verse 1 through 48:35. And that'll finish up the description of the temple here. Then he brought me back to the entrance of the temple. I noticed that water was flowing from under the threshold of the temple toward the east, for the temple faced east. The water was flowing down from under the right side of the temple, from south of the altar. He led me out by way of the north gate, and brought me around the outside of the outer gate that faces toward the east. I noticed that the water was trickling out from the south side. When the man went out toward the east with a measuring line in his hand, he measured 1,750 feet, and then he led me through water, which was ankle deep. Again he measured 1,750 feet, and led me through the water, which was now knee deep. Once more he measured 1,750 feet, and led me through the water, which was waist deep. Again he measured 1,750 feet, and it was a river I could not cross, for the water had risen. It was deep enough to swim in, a river that could not be crossed. He said to me, Son of man, have you seen this? Then he led me back to the bank of the river. When I had returned, I noticed a vast number of trees on the banks of the river, on both sides. He said to me, These waters go out toward the eastern region, and flow down into the Arabah. When they enter the Dead Sea, where the sea is stagnant, the waters become fresh. Every living creature which swarms where the river flows will live. There will be many fish, for these waters flow there. It will become fresh, and everything will live where the river flows. Fishermen will stand beside it. From En-gedi to En-eglaim, they will spread nets. They will catch many kinds of fish, like the fish of the great sea. But its swamps and its marshes will not become fresh. They will remain salty. On both sides of the river's banks, every kind of tree will grow for food. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail, but they will bear fruit every month, because their water source flows from the sanctuary. Their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Here are the borders you will observe as you allot the land to the 12 tribes of Israel. Joseph will have 2 portions. You must divide it equally, just as I vowed to give it to your forefathers. This land will be assigned as your inheritance. This will be the border of the land. On the north side, from the Great Sea, by way of Hethlon to the entrance of Zedad, Hamath, Berothah, Sibarim, which is between the border of Damascus and the border of Hamath, as far as Hazar-Hatticon, which is on the border of Haran. The border will run from the sea to Hazar-Enan, at the border of Damascus, and on the north is the border of Hamath. This is the north side. On the east side, between Haran and Damascus, and between Gilead and the land of Israel, will be the Jordan. You will measure from the border to the eastern sea. This is the east side. On the south side, it will run from Tamar to the waters of Meribah Kadesh, the river to the Great Sea. This is the south side. On the west side, the Great Sea will be the boundary to a point opposite Lebo Hamath. This is the west side. This is how you will divide this land for yourselves among the tribes of Israel. You must allot it as an inheritance among yourselves, and for the foreigners who reside among you, who have fathered sons among you. You must treat them as native-born among the people of Israel. They will be allotted an inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel. In whatever tribe the foreigner resides, there you will give him his inheritance, declares the sovereign Lord. These are the names of the tribes from the northern and beside the road of Hethlon to Lebo-hamath, as far as Hazar-enan, which is on the border of Damascus toward the north, besides Hamath. Extending from the east side to the west, Dan will have one portion. Next to the border of Dan, from the east side to the west, Asher will have one portion. Next to the border of Asher, from the east side to the west, Naphtali will have one portion. Next to the border of Naphtali, from the east side to the west, Manasseh will have one portion. Next to the border of Manasseh, from the east side to the west, Ephraim will have one portion. Next to the border of Ephraim, from the east side to the west, Reuben will have one portion. Next to the border of Reuben, from the east side to the west, Judah will have one portion. Next to the border of Judah, from the east side to the west, will be the allotment you must set apart. It is to be 8¼ miles wide, and the same length as one of the tribal portions from the east side to the west. The sanctuary will be in the middle of it. The allotment you set apart to the Lord will be 8¼ miles in length and 3⅓ miles in width. These will be the allotments for the holy portion. For the priests, toward the north, 8¼ miles in length, toward the west, 3⅓ miles in width, toward the east, 3⅓ miles in width, and toward the south, 8¼ miles in length. The sanctuary of the Lord will be in the middle. This will be for the priests who are set apart from the descendants of Zadok, who kept my charge and did not go astray when the people of Israel strayed off like the Levites did. It will be their portion from the allotment of the land, a most holy place, next to the border of the Levites. Alongside the border of the priests, the Levites will have an allotment 8¼ miles in length and 3⅓ miles in width. The whole length will be 8¼ miles, and the width 3⅓ miles. They must not sell or exchange any of it. They must not transfer this choice portion of land, for it is set apart to the Lord. The remainder, 1 2/3 miles in width and 8¼ miles in length, will be for common use by the city, for houses and for open space. The city will be in the middle of it. These will be its measurements. The north side will be 1 1/2 miles, the south side 1 1/2 miles, the east side 1 1/2 miles, and the west side 1 1/2 miles. The city will have open spaces. On the north, there will be 437½ feet, and on the south, 437½ feet, and on the east, 437½ feet, and on the west, 437½ feet. The remainder of the length alongside the holy allotment will be 3 1/3 miles to the east, and 3 1/3 miles toward the west, and it will be beside the holy allotment. Its produce will be for food for the workers of the city. The workers of the city from all the tribes of Israel will cultivate it. The holy allotment will be 8¼ miles square. You must set apart the holy allotment with the possession of the city. The rest on both sides of the holy allotment and the property of the city will belong to the prince, extending from the 8¼ miles of the holy allotment to the east border, and westward from the 8¼ miles to the west border. Alongside the portions, it will belong to the prince. The holy allotment and the sanctuary of the temple will be in the middle of it. The property of the Levites and of the city will be in the middle of that which belongs to the prince. The portion between the border of Judah and the border of Benjamin will be for the prince. As for the rest of the tribes, from the east side to the west side, Benjamin will have one portion. Next to the border of Benjamin, from the east side to the west side, Simeon will have one portion. Next to the border of Simeon, from the east side to the west side, Issachar will have one portion. Next to the border of Issachar, from the east side to the west side, Zebulun will have one portion. Next to the border of Zebulun, from the east side to the west side, Gad will have one portion. Next to the border of Gad, at the south side, the border will run from Tamar to the waters of Meribeth Kadesh, to the stream of Egypt, and on to the great sea. This is the land which you will allot to the tribes of Israel, and these are their portions, declares the sovereign Lord. These are the exits of the city. On the north side, 1 1/2 miles by measure, the gates of the city will be named for the tribes of Israel. There will be 3 gates to the north, 1 gate for Reuben, 1 gate for Judah, and 1 gate for Levi. On the east side, 1 1/2 miles in length, there will be 3 gates, 1 gate for Joseph, 1 gate for Benjamin, and 1 gate for Dan. On the south side, 1 1/2 miles by measure, there will be 3 gates, 1 gate for Simeon, 1 gate for Issachar, and 1 gate for Zebulun. On the west side, 1 1/2 miles in length, there will be 3 gates, 1 gate for Gad, 1 gate for Asher, and 1 gate for Naphtali. The circumference of the city will be 6 miles. The name of the city from that day forward will be, "The Lord is there." And that's that. Interesting. It's a completely different configuration of breaking up the land um, than was originally apportioned to Israel. Like previously, you had the land being broken up according to the size of the individual tribes. But here, all of the tribes seem to have about the same amount of land apportioned to them. And that portion about water flowing from under the temple, I could combine with this equalness, that is egalitarianism between the various members of the tribe. It seems like these things could definitely be spiritually appraised rather than physically fulfilled, if that makes sense. I mean, given for instance Ezekiel 47:12, which you've got this source of water flowing out from the temple. On both sides of the river's banks, every kind of tree will grow for food. Their leaves will not wither, nor will their fruit fail, but they will bear fruit every month, because their water source flows from the sanctuary. Their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing. This, I guess, idea that God ends up being the source of the source that sustains us and heals us. Okay, let's continue on to 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 11 through chapter 3, verse 7. Dear friends, I urge you as foreigners and exiles to keep away from fleshly desires that do battle against the soul, and maintain good conduct among the non-Christians, so that, though they now malign you as wrongdoers, they may see your good deeds and glorify God when he appears. Be subject to every human institution for the Lord's sake. For the Lord's sake, whether to a king as supreme, or to governors as those he commissions to punish wrongdoers and praise those who do good. For God wants you to silence the ignorance of foolish people by doing good. Live as free people, not using your freedom as a pretext for evil, but as God's slaves. Honor all people, love the family of believers, fear God, honor the king. Slaves, be subject to your masters with all reverence, not only to those who are good and gentle, but also to those who are perverse. For this finds God's favor, if, because of conscience towards God, someone endures hardships and suffering unjustly. For what credit is it if you sin and are mistreated and endure it? But if you do good and suffer and so endure, this finds favor with God. For to this you were called, since Christ also suffered for you, leaving an example for you to follow in his footsteps. He committed no sin, nor was deceit found in his mouth. When he was maligned, he did not answer back. When he suffered, he threatened no retaliation, but committed himself to God, who judges justly. He himself bore our sins in his body on the tree, that we may cease from sinning and live for righteousness. By his wounds you were healed. For you were going astray like sheep, but now you have turned back to the shepherd and guardian of your souls. In the same way, wives, be subject to your own husbands. Then, even if some are disobedient to the word, they will be won over without a word by the way you live, when they see your pure and reverent conduct. Let your beauty not be external, the braiding of hair, and wearing of gold jewelry or fine clothes, but the inner person of the heart, the lasting beauty of a gentle and tranquil spirit, which is precious in God's sight. For in the same way the holy women who hoped in God long ago adorned themselves by being subject to their husbands. Like Sarah, who obeyed Abraham, calling him Lord, you become her children when you do what is good and have no fear in doing so. Husbands, in the same way, treat your wives with consideration as the weaker partners, and show them honor as fellow heirs of the grace of life. In this way, nothing will hinder your prayers. Okay. I think, well, a criticism that I often hear getting lodged by, I don't know, Muslims, I guess in particular, is that, you know, Christians are free to live lawlessly, kind of thing. And it's certainly something that I've heard espoused by so-called Christian groups. I mean, like Rasputin with his all sin, so God's grace abounds all the more. But I think you've got the counter to that here, and well, Paul addresses it elsewhere, but in 1 Peter 2, well, 13 through 17, but in particular 15 and 16. For God wants you to silence the ignorance of foolish people by doing good. Live as free people, not using your freedom as a pretext for evil, but as God's slaves. Yeah. And it's not as though we won't be judged to ascertain the worth of our actions, because apart from the salvation that God gives, there's the section, I think it's Peter who writes about it, where each one's workmanship will be tested by fire. And if you have silver and gold in it, it'll survive the fire, but if you've got straw and stubble in it, it won't survive the fire. But despite your work being burned up, you'll still be saved. So I think the general idea is do good. And I'm glad the reading today extended to both husbands and wives. I think that mutual deferment to each other is important, I guess. That wives be subject to your own husbands, and then husbands treat your wives with considerations and show honor to them. Okay, let's carry on. Psalms. Chapter 119, verses 49 through 64. Zayin. Remember your word to your servant, for you have given me hope. This is what comforts me in my trouble, for your promise revives me. Arrogant people do nothing but scoff at me, yet I do not turn aside from your law. I remember your ancient regulations, O Lord, and console myself. Rage takes hold of me because of the wicked, those who reject your law. Your statutes have been my songs in the house where I live. I remember your name during the night, O Lord, and I will keep your law. This has been my practice, for I observe your precepts. Ket. The Lord is my source of security. I have determined to follow your instructions. I seek your favor with all my heart. Have mercy on me as you promised. I consider my actions and follow your rules. I keep your commands eagerly and without delay. The ropes of the wicked tighten around me, but I do not forget your law. In the middle of the night I arise to thank you for your just regulations. I am a friend to all your loyal followers, and to those who keep your precepts. O Lord, your loyal love fills the earth. Teach me your statutes. Your statutes have been my songs in the house where I live. In verse 54 there. Yeah, I think we should sing for joy when when we have happy hearts to do so. Proverbs 28, 12 through 13. When the righteous rejoice, great is the glory, but when the wicked rise to power, people are sought out. The one who covers his transgressions will not prosper, but whoever confesses them and forsakes them will find mercy. And I think that's the important thing, to confess and forsake transgressions. Okay then, well, thank you for joining me today. Appreciate it. Bye.